Let's debate whether children kept in cages deserve things like beds and toothbrushes and soap. This is how far the Overton window has moved on the issue of child detentions and separations and incarcerations. Or to put it another way, this is how much creeping normality there has been on the issue of caging children. So let me explain those two terms because these are important. When I talk about the Overton window, when I say the Overton window has shifted on this issue, the Overton window is the range of what's acceptable for debate in the public discourse, okay? So for example, in the area of nuclear weapons, the Overton window, more or less, ranges from everybody who wants nukes should have nukes, or everyone should have nukes, sort of on one side, to no one should have nukes, and there should or shouldn't be international agreements limiting who has nukes, and there should or shouldn't be punishments like international sanctions for people, for countries that violate agreements on nukes. Okay, that's sort of all within the Overton window on nuclear weapons. Outside of the Overton window right now would be the position that if a country develops nuclear weapons when they shouldn't, we capture, torture, and kill the children of whoever is president or prime minister at the time. All right, that's a cartoonish example, but that is a position on nuclear weapons that is outside of the Overton window right now. It's not, when you hear that, you don't consider that to be part of what is the acceptable spectrum of debate or position on nuclear weapons. That's Overton window. Creeping normality is another term where you can't jump to where we are today. It has to creep in, slowly normalizing. So as an example, if 20 years ago someone had said, let's radicalize half the country on immigration so that they think brown people from Latin America are the enemy, who are taking our jobs and raping us. And then let's start putting children who come here with undocumented parents in cages. And we only have to debate, do those kids deserve soap and beds and toothbrushes? That would be too much. But that creeps in over 20 years. And here we are debating, do children in the custody of Border Patrol deserve, and are they entitled to, basic hygiene and bedding items? And in fact, we have a Trump Justice Department lawyer who recently insisted in court that safe and sanitary conditions is a vague term, and it may not include something as basic as a bar of soap or a toothbrush or a blanket for the fully lit cold rooms in which these children are forced to sleep, or at least try to sleep. Is being able to sleep at all part of safe and sanitary? Well, Trump's Justice Department lawyer, Sarah Fabian, argued it's not totally clear that it is. I'm going to play some of this video for you of the lawyer arguing with the judges. I'm going to show you several minutes of it so that you can see this wasn't a minor part of this hearing. This is an important and key part of the hearing. They are debating how should these children who have committed no crime, who were just brought here by their parents, and have been taken into custody by Border Patrol, how should they be treated? And do they even deserve something like soap? Take a listen to what took place in a court just a few days ago.
But you're really going to stand up and tell us that being able to sleep isn't a question of safe and sanitary conditions?
Your Honor, I think what I'd like to stand up and
Not
say
really gonna say
is to focus the court on what the question is. Any number of things might fall under those categories, and I think
yes, but sleep surely does, right? You can't be safe and sanitary or safe as a human being if you can't sleep.
Well,
and you said in your briefs it doesn't say anything about sleeping, so therefore there's nothing in here about being able to sleep.
I think the concern there is, Your Honor, the court finding that sleep, for example, is relevant to a finding of no safe and sanitary conditions is one thing, but the ultimate conclusion is safe and sanitary is a singular category in the agreement, and it was one has to assume left that way and not enumerated by the parties because either the parties couldn't reach agreement on how to enumerate that, or that it was left to the agencies to determine.
Or it was relatively obvious, and it's at least obvious enough so that if you're putting people into a crowded room to sleep on a concrete floor with an aluminum foil blanket on top of them, that doesn't comply with the agreement. I mean, it may be that they don't get super thread counts Egyptian linens. I get that. But the testimony that the district judge believed was it's really cold. In fact, it gets colder when we complain about it being cold. We're forced to sleep crowded with the lights on all night long, and all you do put us on is the concrete floor with an aluminum blanket. I mean, I understand at some outer boundary there may be some definitional difficulty, but no one would argue that this is secure and sanitary, safe and sanitary. Or at least I don't think you're arguing that, are you?
Your Honor, I think what I'm arguing is that the way that the district court reached the conclusion was to say these specific items, and I think I will acknowledge, I think sleep is the more difficult end of what I'm arguing. When you start enumerating, for example, specific hygiene items, and the way that was done is that the court sort of enumerated these and say these fall under the rubric, these fall in the category of what could be required.
Again, it wasn't perfume soap, it was soap. It wasn't, high-class milled soap, it was soap. And that sounds, that's part of safe and sanitary.
It's within everybody's common understanding that, if you don't have a toothbrush, if you don't have soap, if you don't have a blanket, it's not safe and sanitary. Well, wouldn't everybody agree to that? Do you agree to that?
Well, I think there's fair reason to find that those things may be part of safe and sanitary.
Maybe, are a part. What do you say maybe?
This is what it sounds like, okay? We're debating, does a 6-year-old separated from his or her parents through no fault of their own and put in a crowded, crappy facility, do they get soap? Do they get a blanket despite having the lights on all night and being super cold and being in close proximity with other people, making basic hygiene even more important to prevent the spread of disease and germs? This is the debate that we are having not only in our legal system, but also in the political world, because there are Trumpists who are on apparently the side of the lawyer, that it's not clear that these children who have done nothing wrong deserve these things. Now, I know lots of lawyers, and I understand you argue for your client. I've met George Zimmerman's lawyer and spent some time with him, and I've gotten an interesting perspective of his view on this issue of he doesn't have to like George Zimmerman to believe that George Zimmerman deserves a defense, but then it starts to get more complicated when you get into some of these specific situations. You argue for your client, not necessarily for what you believe. But how does this woman sleep at night? Everything that is taking place here is completely backwards. And I hate to even go to a financial argument, because for me, the moral argument and the legal argument are so obvious here. But to make a financial argument, isn't it much cheaper to spend some money on soap and blankets and toothbrushes and prevent the types of illness and disease that would spread if kids can't sleep and can't clean themselves? Isn't that much cheaper than having to treat the diseases and conditions that would arise from no hygiene in such crowded and concentrated situations? Although maybe the whole point is they don't really have a plan of treating those conditions anyway. And secondly, if you look at what it costs to keep these kids detained, and estimates range from $300 a day up to $750 a day or more, how are we not able to just obviously afford and have the soap and bedding on hand? Which is why this gets to, I don't actually think that the financial issue is the issue. This gets back to that strict father morality I've spoken about before, which is it doesn't matter if we can afford it. It doesn't matter if even legally there's a case to be made that these basic hygiene products should be provided to these kids. There is a contingent in this country that on a moral level believes that children whose parents came to the United States illegally or came to the border legally seeking asylum, that the children as a result don't deserve soap when the United States decides to enforce and carry out a policy of putting these kids in what are effectively cages. And there are other terms we could even use when we talk about the crowded conditions. It is absolutely stunning that this is a debate that we're having, but this is how the discourse has gone in the United States over the last 20 years. The Overton window has shifted. There has been creeping normalization of this stuff. And this is where we are in 2019. And it doesn't bode well for us as a society, doesn't bode well for us as an economy, doesn't bode well for us as a country. It's sad and depressing, but this is the reality today. One of today's sponsors is Impeach the Card Slap Game. You can't slap Donald Trump in real life, but you can slap him in this really funny and intelligent 2-player card game. And you can get it for 10% off when you go to davidpakman.com/impeach and use the coupon code Pakman Show at checkout, all one word. Impeach the Card Slap game is perfect for having friends over or hanging out with family members who have a sense of humor about Trump. We've been playing it at my place. It currently has a 5 out of 5-star rating on Amazon. I really don't think you'll be able to find a game that does a better job of satirizing today's political climate in such an intelligent way. I've had a ton of fun with it, and I think you will too. You can tell a ton of time and careful thought went into the game design and the cartoon artwork and the humor. It never gets old because you're always discovering new jokes and political commentary within the game. We were talking to the creators of the game, and they said one of their goals was that players might even learn something new as they play. I think it would make a perfect gift for anyone, really, of any political orientation, just because of how clever it is. Or you can get it for yourself and have a really fun and witty game to play when people come over. Get Impeach the Card Slap game by going to davidpakman.com/impeach and get 10% off when you use the coupon code PakmanShow at checkout. That's all one word, Pakman Show.